Oops. Hold on. We're live.
We're live. From Mount Shasta, it's spring snowstorm number 2. We were surprised today with 3 inches of very wet snow. That didn't even start snowing until 8 or 9. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Hello, everyone. I am Golden Eagle, your host for this. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh. Did you get it? Okay. Okay. All right. We're here to talk about, well, which show is this? Mm-hmm. Is this the, Looks at Books show, or is this the sci-fi show, or is this the Toltec show?
Punch and Judy.
It's a trick question. It's the Looks at Books show. It's the sci-fi show. And it's the Toltec show. Let me know when people come online.
It's like we have Nina Devine.
Yay.
William Rowling. And Yvonne Crafton. Okay.
Keep an eye out for anyone from the San Ramon crowd. Nina wants to be on TV too. Yeah. Keep an eye out for anyone from Team Tampa and anyone else for that matter. Before I start, are there any questions? Okay, when you have them, since nobody in the studio audience has questions right now. Oh, apparently I didn't pet her correctly. Let's move on.
So Team Tampa is here. Woo, woo, woo.
Woo-hoo.
Go Team Tampa. And Maria, so I guess Maria is holding space in Wisconsin.
Team Wisconsin. Hey, Maria, we're above freezing.
Right? Oh, she's up to 50 degrees, she told me today.
Oh, I don't think we were that high today.
Really?
We're still in the 40s. But we had 3 more inches of snow today. What about you?
Well, I would call it slush, but...
Well, that's true.
And Patricia is here.
Patricia, my friend. Any questions from anyone online? I'll give you a minute to type and the 30-second delay for it.
Oops.
So barring questions, what we're going to talk about tonight, as promised, is what's next. And that's my question to you. So you thought you were going to get away without interacting. I am here to inform you, you must interact. The universe demands interaction. From the time you're born, you learn to interact. Your body, these biological machines we are inhabiting, undergoes strange sensations that cause you to scream until somebody puts something in your mouth that you can consume, then it makes you stop screaming. And thus starts your training in a biological machine, and thus starts your training of the people around you. Because you learn quickly that if you scream, somebody puts something in your mouth. Sometimes it tastes really good. Other times it might be a fist or a foot. But something will go into your mouth. Any questions yet?
So there's a Karen B. I'm not sure if that's Karen Bloom. And says, can you share how I can be in my peaceful center when experiencing negative feelings like anger and fear? And asks Kathy. So, so this may be from Team Tampa.
Oh, that's Team Tampa.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure which Kathy and Karen we're talking about.
Okay, well, I think there's a Kathy and a Karen team.
Okay.
I don't have the checklist in front of me. I left my attendance roster in the other room. Actually, it's in there, in that computerized machine you're driving.
So Nina says yes. So these are...
Okay. When you're experiencing fear and anger, was those the two things? Fear and anger. Okay. Fear and anger are the same thing. I remember a long time ago now, the first time I heard that, I said, oh, that's a crock of baloney. I mean, at that time in my life, I would use a different B word. I would have said something about bovine something or other, because I didn't understand it. And therefore, if I didn't understand it, it must be wrong. That's the ego of the machine thinking for us. Fear ultimately comes down to something trying to eat us, to kill us and eat us. And anger, and somebody does something that makes you anger, it's because it has disrupted the environment. It has disrupted the energy around you. And anything that disrupts energy is a potential threat that might want to kill you and eat you. Or maybe they just start eating you before you're dead. You know, they could just bite off an arm and then bite off an elbow and work their way up, and you're not quite dead yet. So those are emotions associated with our biological machine. The ego mind, the instinct, that biological imperative that says, I want to keep alive. Don't know why, but death is a bad thing. It's programmed into the biology of every living creature on our planet. Probably on all the other planets too. I'm not making any claims about the other planets tonight. Well, we'll see. So, anger and fear result usually from something in our energy field that we don't like. And so how do you keep your strong center, I think you said, when this is going on? When people are being mean to you and saying bad things about you and trying to kill you and eat you. They're telling stories about you on the internet. Oh, that awful Toltec shaman. Do you know what he said? And they take exactly what I said and they reverse it to the exact opposite. Anybody who knows me, for instance, would hear that and say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like that Golden Eagle Toltec shaman guy I know, because he said exactly the opposite. So I don't believe you. I think you might have something wrong. Whether there's anybody there to say that or not, the people who matter won't believe it. And anybody who believes it won't matter. And so it becomes important for us all to live our lives in a way that what other people think about us or what other people say about us won't matter. In the Toltec work, we have a concept that we refer to as our place of power. Think of this, got to put the cup down for this one, as an archer shooting a bow. So there's and I'm not talking about the archer, I'm talking about the bow and arrow. So the bow has been strung. You don't store the bows strung while they're under tension. You unstring them and you let the tension out and it relaxes. Just like we need to relax at night. So you're going to get ready to shoot. Maybe you're going hunting. Maybe the barbarians are attacking. because we've been known to do that. You take the bow and you string it. So now the bow is under a certain amount of tension, not the maximum tension yet. And then you take an arrow and you knock it on the string, and you just pull it a little bit. Not all the way, but a little bit. So the bow is under tension, the string is under tension, and the arrow is starting to feel the tension of the string that wants to shoot it forward. But your finger is preventing that from happening. So the bow is ready to do its job wherever it's aimed by the archer. The bow and arrow are both ready. They're out of the quiver. The bow is strung. It's in the hands of the archer who is wielding it. And at a moment's notice, all the archer has to do is, and the arrow's gone. Just that fast, from here to here. You pull, and in one motion, you let go. The good archers don't aim. They know, they feel. There's a Japanese Zen book called Zen and the Art of Archery that describes this perfectly. It's a wonderful study in martial arts. And so that state of the bow, it's under some tension, but it's not the maximum. And that partial state of tension of the bow is what we equate to our state of personal power and getting to our place of power. The place of power. And it takes practice to learn how to get there. We use the Akadwa to assist us. We have exercises. And then once you get there, the first time, all your senses are heightened. You're hearing, all of a sudden you're hearing the mouse out in the front yard chewing the plant he's not supposed to be chewing. You hear the cat upstairs scratching something, a box that they've decided to use as a scratching post, and they're not supposed to be. You're seeing everything with your peripheral vision, but you're not yet focused on anything. The aroma of the incense I burned an hour ago lingers in the air. When we're in this state, we can taste what we ate for dinner an hour ago. You feel through the skin all the pressures, all the vibrations, all the sensations. You're ready for anything. You're like that partially drawn bow. You can move in any direction. You can think in any direction. You can instantly extend your energy field in any direction. That's a place of power. There's a mudra, and I apologize, I don't know the formal name of it, but when we interlace our fingers like thus and put the tips of the thumbs together, we've closed off our fields so that we are less vulnerable energetically. You'll see this in old paintings of monks in the Middle Ages walking through deprivation, and they're like this, so they don't absorb that. They were trying to keep themselves separate. Should they have done that? That's a different question. I'm not going to answer that. So when you're in your place of power, you command a certain space around you. And nothing should be allowed in unless you let it. And you can experience this when you meet powerful people. If you try to get too close to them, you're going to feel almost a sense of repulsion. Oh, I don't want to get too close. You might turn me into a newt, or whatever your sensation is. It's a sense that energetically you don't belong in that space because you haven't been invited in. So the first step to dealing with the subject that you asked about is learning to develop and refine your place of power. When nothing can get into your fields without your permission, and you dedicate yourself to every day being in your place of power all the time, then all of a sudden you start to realize that stuff out there doesn't bother me. And you start to develop that sense of responsibility for creating your world. Many of us had practice relationships, practice marriages, where we didn't get along with our ex. And at some point, we realized that a lot of the conditions that created the friction between our ex and ourselves, we co-created those. We allowed it, if nothing else. We didn't set boundaries that should have been set. We bought in to a lie for domestic expediency. And when we've learned those lessons, then all of a sudden we will set boundaries and those relationships end. We got out of it what we needed to. It's like, oh, yeah, I had forgotten that. So now I know, oh yeah, there's this boundary thing. I'm going to set that, and I'm not going to let people in that I am not a vibrational match for. This question you ask is what's referred to in the writings of many spiritual systems, is how do you stay calm in a storm? How do you maintain that center? The first thing I would say is practice. The second thing I would say is, have you really developed that state of calm, that state of your place of power, to the point that you really and truly know what it is? And if not, that's where we need to start, is we practice getting to our place of power. There was a famous novel about 100 years ago called The Razor's Edge. It was written by William Somerset Maugham, M-A-U-G-H-M, I think. It was made into a movie at least twice. Once with Tyrone Power. It was black and white back in the olden days of last century when I grew up. Although not quite as long ago as Tyrone Power. And then it was remade later, I think in the 80s, maybe it was the 70s, starring Bill Murray, the famous comedian of Saturday Night Live fame, when he started branching out and doing more than just comedy. And either version is quite good, and so is the novel. The long story short is a rich young man goes off to World War I as an ambulance driver, and when he sees and experiences the horrors of war, he decides he's not going to go home and marry the boss's daughter and live a life of luxury. And instead, he works to make some money, and he travels to Tibet. And he goes into a monastery and spends many years there and achieves that mystical state of enlightenment that we all think we're going for, even if we don't know what it is. And then, after having achieved this, and having been designated by the head lama of the monastery to be the person to take his place when he dies, he decides to leave and go back into society. And the Lama says, my son, you've accomplished so much. Why do you want to leave and go back down there? And his answer was, it's easy to be a holy man on top of a mountain. So he went back down into the fray of the chaos. When he gets back and meets his friends, the Great Depression has occurred and several people are having health problems and several people have died, and the girl he was supposed to marry is now married to somebody else and they have a bad marriage, and you know, all this chaos of the early 1930s. And he brings peace to them in many ways. And so he learned how to maintain that center in chaos of the day-to-day life out there in the real world, of people cutting you off in traffic and saying bad things about you, or friends at work who backstab you, whatever it is. There's a lot of chaos in the world right now. If you don't believe me, spend 2 minutes on the internet and you'll be reminded. And some of it you have control over, some of it you don't yet. We don't have control over some of the major things until we learn how to work in groups and change the collective consciousness, which is what we're doing in a Toltec world. So first, you get to your place of power. Second is when you are living your life with an intent. A big intent to find you and accomplish your true will. A little intent, like here's what I'm doing today and here's why. And you recognize what's important and what isn't, even if it's interesting. You learn to judge almost instantly whether or not anything that's affecting you is important or not. And if it's not important, no matter how angry you might feel in the moment, it's one of those, I don't care. Go away. And we learn not to attach any emotion to the outcome of a situation. The place of power is key. The Akadwa is a tool for all of these consciousness activities. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves because you don't have your level 2 yet. Mm-hmm. What time is it? When are we doing that? Soon. But when you do, there's some techniques with the frequency that we will teach you on how to deal with that better. And then learn this mudra and use it. I've had people go away and say, wow, that really works. Well, yeah, it really works. Because you're closing your fields and you're holding an intent when you do this to not let anything in. And you start with the space around you, then you start with a room, and then you start with your whole property, wherever you live. You can do it in your workspace if you have a job. Bosses will come up to you trying to chew you out, and if you're sitting there in your place of power with your little mudra on, looking very attentive, like you're seriously interested in whatever this idiot person is telling you, and they just, it neutralizes them. Either it bounces off and back on them, or it just flows by, and they just kind of go, oh. When people try to use fear and intimidation to influence your behavior, and you don't respond appropriately, they don't know what to do. They just don't know what to do. So I hope that's at least a start at answering your question. Any other questions?
So there's two questions. Patty asks, do we have an idea when we might access the orbs and when students might be able to come and play at our place? So I can answer that.
Okay, put the camera on you, please.
Okay. Roll on. Requires a little more technical. So I saw today from the Institute that the cards and the orbs are released now officially as of today. So we will look into the one, I think it's called the integration. I can't remember. It starts with an I. But the main one that we is good for any time, and then we'll purchase that for the school. And probably there will only be one weekend, that first weekend in April, that we can probably get together as a group. And then we're going to be out of town for a week and a half. And so it will be later in April before we can really get together. So that's where we're at with it. But the cards and the other orbs are available if you want to go ahead and look into that for yourself. Let's see. The other question is from Karen in Tampa. Can you please share how we can send or apply the Akadua for someone's healing and protection who does not believe and will not give their open permission?
They don't believe in it and they won't give their open permission for you to use it on them, then you cannot satisfy the oath you took when you received the Akadua and use it on them. You're going to use it for the benefit of all beings everywhere. You haven't had the portion yet of our lecture on ethics. It goes with the level 1 class. But if someone has specifically said no, they don't want it, then you can't use it on them, not ethically. Anyway, that would be a violation of the ethics. That's a curious situation. Throughout my medical career, throughout my spiritual shamanic work, I had more of those kinds of situations than I can count. People that I know I could help, and I explain, oh, this natural medicine, you do this and this and this, and these things happen, and it works. And, oh no, I'm suspicious. That alternative, I'd rather go down to the science-based doctor and get my poison. I'll be happier that way. And I've watched people refuse treatments and go home and die. I've had to watch people physically damage themselves, not to the point of death. I've watched people end up in unhappy relationships, unhappy life situations, because they wouldn't accept help that I could have given. And that's a tough one. Go ahead.
So she adds that he won't say no, he just won't be aware. And he's going in for surgery while she'll be here in Shasta.
Okay, so he wouldn't say no?
So what's that?
What was her previous question?
The question is, can you please share how we can send or apply the Akadua for someone's healing and protection who does not believe and will not give their open permission? So it seems to me it's irrelevant. You're still talking about, he won't say no, he just won't be aware. Well, he needs to be aware. If he has the ability to be aware, he needs to be aware. And then there's also the idea of infusing a space with an intent.
This is a delicate question. I wish we had two-way live communications, which hopefully we will be able to add that technology at some point. But you say that he won't, the first one where right at the end, he says he won't do what?
who does not believe and will not give their open permission.
He doesn't believe, he won't give open permission, but then later on you say he won't say no if he's asked.
But, well, she said, but he won't be aware. So if he's asked, he would be aware.
So if the surgery is when you're here, my suggestion is that you should, that the ethics would dictate, can you ask them? That you should ask him, can I send healing thoughts? Can I send healing love? Can I send a prayer? I mean, we pray about people all the time, except in cases where somebody may ask you specifically, I'm doing my own process, don't pray for me. So I think based on what I heard here, that my suggestion is you need to ask them. And if he says, yeah, do your woo-woo stuff, it won't help, it won't hurt, so just do your woo-woo thing, that's fine. And if he says, please don't do anything, then you got to respect that. So, any other questions coming in?
Not really.
Okay, so my question to all of you is what's next? What's next in your Toltec work? What's next in your Cadre work? What's next in your life? What's next for humanity? What's next in terms of your next meal? Any of those are all fair game. In terms of the Toltec work, over the last, I don't know, year and a half plus, we've taught people a lot of basic skills and techniques intended to upgrade your individual consciousness, to help you access the higher energy, higher frequency planes of reality that most people don't see or interact with. We've taught you meditation. We've taught you how to clear energy from the past that's holding you back, or that's robbing energy that you could use to move forward. There's a lot of things we've done in that regard. We've given you information and reading assignments, and we've introduced you to skills and techniques and technologies from other shamanic practitioners, like this last weekend's field trip to E.J. Gold, or when Coyote the Blind was up here in this most recently in December, Coyote being my teacher and benefactor. So we teach these tools, we teach these skills. The purpose is so that at the first level, you can upgrade your consciousness. The main goal of that is to make contact with your holy guardian angel, that divine being that's assigned to us, that is guiding us, whether we realize it or not. This divine being who goes to great trouble sometimes to arrange synchronicities, hoping to dent our consciousness and so we become aware of what we're supposed to be doing. And then we try to work in groups to have a stronger impact on the collective consciousness of humanity, so that we can change the world, so we don't have this political drama, this charade that's being played out every day in newspapers with all the divide and conquer tactics on every issue imaginable. It's holding humanity back from our true potential. So we are reactivating and bringing out, as basically fast as people get ready for the next step, many skills and abilities that our lineage held back in the days of Atlantis, some of which were misused, and we're trying to get back to that level we were at before Atlantis started to degrade. Um, in the world of science fiction, one of the recurring themes, the recurring trends that's popular for many reasons is the concept of post-apocalyptic situations. So nuclear war happens and things go to heck in a handbasket, and now people are trying to survive, and we're trying to regain knowledge and technology, but the battle of good or evil that brought about the nuclear war is still there. There's the good guys, the bad guys, and we're still fighting. And you'll see that theme in a lot of literature. You'll see it in the Bible, in the book of Revelations. When you read some of the Indian texts, like the Mahabharata, they describe the nuclear war that went on tens of thousands of years ago. And everything seems to be coming to a head. You know, we're good guys and bad guys, and we're back to our saber rattling and nuclear arms rattling, and I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. And this is the same battle, the same good versus evil battle. Einstein once said that you cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So we need to upgrade our thinking, which means we need to upgrade our consciousness, which means we need the Toltec work, which is why academia, one reason why academia is trying so hard to erase the Toltec culture from history, as if we never existed. I've talked about that in the past. I'm not going to dwell on it. I said earlier that, yes, this is a science fiction show. I'm going to hold this book out. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, tip it forward just a touch.
There?
Yeah. Can you guys see that?
Okay. It's called The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. It's book one of a 14-book series called The Wheel of Time. This series is called The Wheel of Time. It's a fantasy fiction novel series set in a hypothetical world in a post-apocalyptic environment where things are building up and heading towards a final battle. The Bible calls it Armageddon. This book calls it Tarmageddon. But there's a caveat right here in the front that says, oh yeah, any resemblance to real people, places, or things is purely coincidental. So we're not really basing this on the book of Revelations and Armageddon. No. What's unique about the Wheel of Time and the whole smear of books is it's set in a world where they have a very strong form of subtle energy, oftentimes not so subtle, that they call the one power. It's divided into two main polarities. Where have I heard that before? A male half and a feminine half. So women wield the feminine half, men wield the male half. Masculine, there we go, that's the word. And underneath each polarity, there's, what is it, 6 or 7, 6 frequencies, what I would call frequencies, different aspects, some of which are curiously similar to Akadua frequencies, purely by coincidence, I'm sure. I don't want to give the plot away. It's elegantly complex, and when the lead characters do things that are really stupid, that they should have known better, you find yourself screaming at them and throwing the book across the room saying, "Those idiots." Kind of like my reaction when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita and screaming at Arjuna for not doing his true will that he came here to do, where I just spent the last year or two railing against my true will and what I was here to do. And then as I'm reading Arjuna, I go, oh, go do what I'm supposed to do. That was quite a few years ago, and it was one of those little throw a switch moments. So the unique thing about the Wheel of Time series is it's a textbook on how to use the energy. It describes things that are possible, and what they're going through is reactivating knowledge to things that are described in their textbooks that nobody knows how to do anymore. So we're looking at this as like, wow, you can do what? How do I do that? And we have to learn. Some of them we know how to do. Healing at a distance, we know how to do. That's just one example. So in your copious amounts of spare time, which I know everybody has lots of, we highly recommend that you pick up book 1, The Eye of the Needle, and start reading. And by the time you finish it, you're going to be hooked and want to read all of them. It takes a while. They're slow. I'm on book 11. I'm halfway through it. I still haven't gotten to book 14. And in terms of what's next with the Akadwa, it's going to give you some ideas. Coyote likes to talk about how, of all his students, we're all off doing things he never thought of. Now, some of my students are off out doing things, that's kind of cool. I never thought of that. That's what we need. We don't need tens of people doing that. We don't need hundreds of people doing that. We need tens of thousands of people doing that with the Akadwa. Amplifying our consciousness, amplifying our abilities, helping humanity get to our next quantum leap in health, in consciousness, in human potential. So, in terms of what's next, I'm waiting. I don't know what's next for you. I know that my job is to teach you the tools and teach you some techniques of how to use those tools. And then you're supposed to go off out there and save the universe with some help from your friends. And the Wheel of Time is a primer, a good textbook on what can be done with energies that I never thought of before. Health. I mentioned health. In order for us to do anything with energy, we have to be able to vibrate properly. That means we need our physical form to be clean and as pure as we can make it. Sort of like if you have a grand piano that hasn't been cleaned out in years and it's not sounding right. You have to clean out the dust and use your vacuum cleaner and get it all out and get it all tuned and adjusted and all the little levers properly lubricated, and then you bring in the tuner and he tunes it up, and then you sit down to play the piano. Wow, is that my piano? Wow, listen to how that sounds. That's what we have to do with our bodies. The physical body has to be put together and rebuilt with proper parts. When you got a really expensive luxury car and it needs repairs, you don't take it down and have them put the cheap parts in. You have them put the good parts in. The parts for our physical body are food. It's what we eat. So that's just one step of many at being optimally healthy on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual and energetic levels, which is what we need to do our work, to do this Toltec work, to do whatever. So towards that end, It's on the website. Can that be seen?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Okay. Heal your life, heal the world, establishing health as a prerequisite for accomplishing your true spiritual purpose in life. It's here. Well, this is the proof copy. The others will be arriving hopefully by the end of the week. I hope that I have it here. This is a culmination of 20 years of clinical practice and even more in spiritual work that basically addresses why we should be healthy, which is to facilitate our spiritual work and accomplishing what we came here to do, and then how to be healthy, and what are the biggest impediments to being healthy. And it has a step-by-step plan for how to do that. And it's all crammed into what's going to be just over 400 pages of stuff. It was 2 years in the preparation. And that's sort of like the sum of my natural healing knowledge at this point. And then I'm putting that out to the world. And yeah, I'll be lecturing and traveling and whatnot on that. But most of my work is focused on energy and the spiritual work, because that's what our culture is most in denial of and most trying to stop the spread of knowledge of. So that's where I'm putting my attention in the future. So in terms of what's next for the Toltec work, we've been working since, last November on developing your version of a better model for how humanity can function. And you came up with the subject, and now you're coming up with ways to get your message out. This is mine. At least the first step of getting this message out. That's only one of the many messages I'm getting out. But that's the major one for this year. I've got 2 or 3 other smaller books coming out, and a couple other major ones in work. So in terms of what's next for the Toltec School is we are collaborating on better models. It's based on a famous concept from Buckminster Fuller, the geodesic dome guy, that says you don't fix problems by fixing problems. You fix problems by coming up with a new model that makes the old way obsolete. So we want to be, it's time. So whatever piece of that puzzle of making our problem-laden world obsolete that you have chosen to work on, it's time. Time is of the essence. The world is undergoing changes. The planet we live on is a living organism. It's evolving. We individual humans are evolving. That's one of the reasons we're here, is to help the human collective evolve. The reason we need to evolve and the human collective needs to evolve is that's the process we use to evolve our higher essence. The target of all this world that we're doing in the physical world is to provide a stimulus to our essence, that eternal piece of us that can't come from the higher frequency realms. We need this voltage difference driving that. And so we come here individually and collectively to drive the evolution of our own individual essence, as well as the human collective essence. And then there are reasons beyond that that we're working for the transformation of the universe. So I jokingly say, only partially jokingly say a lot, oh, we're here to save the world, or we're here to save the universe. And yeah, we are. So this work is important. And if you feel called to it, I can assure you it will be the most rewarding thing you do with your life, is to develop the skills to raise your consciousness and find and fulfill your piece of that great work. And it's serious, and it is not necessarily easy, and there will be a lot of roadblocks thrown up in our way, so we have to get good at getting around, over, under, around, or through roadblocks, and we can't let the little stuff bother us. And we have to learn that discernment of what's important, what's not. So that's my question to you. What's next? Who has answers?
I don't see any answers to your question.
Well, that is my offering to you today, is start pondering that and figure out for you what's next. What is next becomes an intent. And if you put all your focus on it, that's what happens. So it's important to remember as we do this work that we're not alone. There's a lot of high-powered people on the higher planes rooting for us, cheering for us, guiding us if we let them. I think the most generic term that we can use is that's the ancestors. The ascended beings, the ascended masters, the angels, the archangels. Fill in the blank for whichever version of the higher divine being pantheon you like. And learn to tap into that knowledge. We can teach those techniques. We tap into that knowledge, and we have to ask. Every problem that we see in the world, there are answers available. And we can either reinvent the wheel, or we can ask, hey, you got something that'll make moving these objects on the ground easier instead of just dragging them? Oh yeah, we got this thing called a wheel and axle. You build it like this, and then, wow, that's really cool. Great, thanks. So don't reinvent the wheel. When there's 200 divine beings up there who have an answer that can help you on your piece of the puzzle, ask them. This is possible in some of the Toltec meditation techniques. Ask them. Hey, how can I do this? Hey, how can I do that? Ask the ancestors. The Toltec work, which has its roots in Atlantis, of course that means it goes back even further, because Atlantis had its roots in Lemuria, and Lemuria had its roots on other planets. There's been other influences from different interplanetary cultures, and what went wrong at Atlantis is complex, but it involved ego, it involved extreme arrogance, it involved a lack of willingness or ability to be brutally self-honest about their intentions and their abilities and their motivations. That's one reason why, when we teach the Akadwa, ethics is one of the things we discuss. We don't need to be blowing up any more planets. And sending healing energy to someone may seem altruistic, but if they've said no, then it's, and you do it anyway, it's really the first step down the road of blowing up continents, if not entire planets. And so that's why I would say, yeah, go ask, and if the answer is no, then accept it as their informed choice. When we do this work, we took the oath to use the Akadwa for the benefit of all beings everywhere. And as I talked once, that there's several pieces of that. Use it for benefit, don't use it for harm, but also use it. That's important. So when you have this Akadwa, this force from the higher planes, its intent is to be used, but use it wisely, use it ethically. And we don't limit ourselves just to healing. And coming from me, that means a lot for the people who've known me for years. Because when I first was drawn to the Akadwa, I was drawn for its healing abilities. After having spent more than 15 years, almost 20 years, doing natural healing of different types, including acupuncture, and having been exposed to Qigong masters who were really kind of lame at what they were doing, I saw what the Akadwa could do. Many times more powerful. So I picked up that banner and ran with it, and some people liked it. The reception as purely a healing tool was mediocre on a good day. But every bit where I went, people kept asking about the spiritual uses of the Akadwa. And in the fullness of time, as I grew into a better understanding of the Akadwa and a better appreciation of the Akadwa, and I accepted my calling into this path of shamanic initiation in this lineage, I realized that, yeah, it's not just a healing tool. And Coyote tells you the same thing. It's a lot more. So we use it for consciousness. We use it to enhance everything we do. And we use it linked together to accomplish things. So figuring out for you what's next is your what's next. What's next for you is what I'm asking you to do, is figure out what's next.
Well, what next kind of assumes that you've arrived or completed a step. So, like, for what next, for me, is simply working on the things I already have in front of me.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. We go through little, it's like climbing stairs. You get up a step and then you're there. Or a video game, you go up the next step. You have to master what's in front of you. And at some point you'll know that it's time for the next step. But even on the plateau of working on what's in front of you, you know, I've got in the other room a whole list of what's next. Oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta get this message out. There's a lot there. And the reason I'm dwelling on that tonight is apparently some of you need to hear that. When I did my meditation on what do people need to hear today, that's what they need to hear today, okay? So I'm dutifully delivering the message in a way that I hope will get your attention. Is the corollary to what I'm saying here is, do not allow yourself to become complacent. Do not allow yourself to be comfortable. Not too comfortable. If you need a nap every now and then, take a nap, but then get up and get back to work. Complacency and comfort are your enemies. You can't transform yourself and humanity and remain comfortable. We have to push the envelope. That's the only thing that's going to work. Any other questions out there in internet land?
Mohadib and Little Eagle both claim to know what's next for them.
Okay.
And then Yvonne goes on to say, what is, I think it was when you were talking, something you said when you were talking about the ancestors. So she wants to know what is immediate that the ancestors want us to do, I believe she means. And then she heard an owl hooting outside.
The owls have been around more lately.
Yeah.
Interesting. Read those again, please.
Well, just the two of them say they know what's next.
Okay, that's good. Good.
And then Yvonne says, what is immediate that the ancestors want us to do?
What right now that they want you to do? Okay. First and foremost is you have to embrace this concept that you are not an android under control of anyone. It's not so much what the ancestors want us to do. The first thing they would tell you is figure out how to make contact with your holy guardian angel and with the ancestors so you can have conversations. It's not just instructions. I use the ancestors for advice. They're at the higher plane. They have better visibility on things than I do. And yet I'm the one down on the field. I'm the one who has to carry it out. So it's a collaboration. It's not just a directive. It's not like I'm a player in a video game, nor are you. So what's next for the Toltec work is to be able to channel, and you've heard me say this before, channel large amounts of energy, hold your attention on one subject for a long period of time, and to successfully carry out a procedure using that without deviation. Remember my rocket scientist's mantra. That's important for using high levels of energy. So a little bit of like what Aurea said is do what's on your plate, get those skills mastered, but have an intent for where you're going. So you said what you know what's next, Little Eagle. So what do the ancestors want you to do is do that. You know what's next? Do it. That's what's next.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So for those of you who've been following EJ's work with the orbs and the PLS cards and this new set of cards, also for those of you who have gone through the level 4 intensive, the work with the past lives and parallel lives are things that in one way are connecting you to your past. So whether it was you back then or your relatives back then or whatever, there's different energies that we each start to identify with. And there's a lot of power in just learning to make those connections. So some of the tools that we learned from doing the Book of the Dead readings is specifically the techniques that you need to have to be able to make contact with a Voyager, someone who is in transition, and also those who have already transitioned out of the space. So that includes the ancestors. And of course, I believe Golden Eagle's talking about ancestors within the lineage and ancestors within your genetic lineage as well. And the whole pantheon of archetypes that you could be tapping into. So the first step is actually to learn how to make these connections, and the most closest, as he pointed out, is to work with your holy guardian angel first. You need to know who you're talking to. You need to have at least that one most important guide to be able to know what you're connecting with. But from there, when you receive energies from who you may believe you're trying to connect with an ancestor, at least you have your holy guardian angel that you can bounce that off of and saying, is this someone I should be talking to? Is this an energy that I want to be working with? Is this important to my work that I'm doing now? And just kind of along all of that is to remember the saying that we're looking for a heightened sense of indifference. So, in other words, we have what Golden Eagle was speaking of earlier with this tension on the bow. That's the heightened sense part, right? But we need to not be attached to the outcome of these different events and be ready to either act, pull that string on that bow and plant that arrow where you want it. But we also need to know where we're at, who we're talking to, and how to read these influences. And that starts with knowing yourself, which is stalking yourself first. We need to know who we are and what our tendencies are, and to develop that body of habits so that we can basically work from instinct. So when you learn to dance, or you learn Tai Chi, or you learn whatever you learn, you're going to go through a curve where it seems awkward, where you have to hold up the piece of paper and you have to go through the movements. But at some point, you don't need the paper anymore. You have that free flow of movement, and that's where your peaceful center needs to be. Is in the chaos. You can't be this rigid thing. This is, I guess, where a good analogy is the reed that needs to bend with the winds rather than getting crushed by them. And then when the winds have gone, then we pop back up again.
Any other questions? Quiet bunch tonight. Quiet bunch. Okay, I'm going to stop here since there are no more questions, and that'll give you time to go and read one of your reading assignments that I've given you, like the 4 required books, or 1984, or the Robert Jordan novels. There's only 14 of them, so you should get through that before you go to bed tonight. Do some reading, do some meditating, practice those techniques you've learned. Activate the Akadwa and do something with it. Do something fun. Shoot those fireballs. Question.
You had mentioned about the books that you're recommending. There will be an online pre-release discounted price for Dr. Cage's Heal Your Life, Heal the World book, which will be out shortly. And so you want to take advantage of that. There's also a similar special out right now for Coyote the Blind's book, Teachings of a Toltec Survivor. So that price is a limited price, so act on that if you're interested in that book. And seems like there was one other thing.
Class Saturday.
Level 1 class here in Mount Shasta. And yeah, if you have any, the other thing that I wanted to recommend was actually the Akadwa manual. So many of you have been around the Akadwa for a while and may have forgot or have never even purchased an Akadwa manual. Once you have the courses, it's not as much of a necessity, but if you forgot what you're supposed to be doing and what some of the basic exercises and information about the Akadwa are, that manual is also available online, and that's something that has the basic exercises in it. So make sure you know how to send circuits and how to build energy and move it around, and keep doing that. You need to use it every day to really get good at it.
I agree. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll see some of you before next Monday, and some of you probably next Monday. So thank you for tuning in. Do good, avoid evil.